What happens when one of America's most seasoned interviewers meets a royal who thought she was prepared for anything? A conversation that started as a standard morning show segment quickly transformed into one of the most uncomfortable confrontations ever broadcast on national television. Before we dive into the explosive exchange between George Stephanopoulos and Meghan Markle that has everyone talking, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our breakdowns of the most shocking moments in media. And trust me, you are going to want to stick around until the very end of this video to see exactly how this interview went completely off the rails. It was supposed to be a routine appearance on Good Morning America. Meghan Markle arrived at the ABC studios to promote her latest charitable foundation. George Stephanopoulos, not originally scheduled to conduct the interview, replaced Robin Roberts at the last minuta, seemingly innocent change that would prove to be the catalyst for what unfolded. Thank you for joining us this morning. Stephanopoulos began professionally. Your foundation has been making headlines recently. Markle smiled confidently. Yes, George, we've been doing incredible work focusing on mental health awareness and support for women re-entering the workforce. The response has been overwhelming. What viewers at home couldn't see was the production assistant who had just handed Steph a note. His expression changed subtly as he glanced down at it. Before we discuss the foundation, Stephanopoulos pivoted. I wanted to address some reporting that came across my desk this morning. There seems to be a discrepancy between the financial statements your organization filed publicly and what several donors have claimed regarding their contributions. The camera caught it perfectly at that microsecond of shock in Marle's eyes before her media training kicked in. I am not sure what reports you're referring to, George. Our financial records are completely transparent. Well, according to documents we've obtained, Stephanopoulos continued holding up a folder. Several donors have come forward saying their contributions were reported as significantly larger than what they actually provided. One donor in particular, a Mr. Winter, claims his $10,000 donation was reported as $100,000 in your public disclosures. The studio fell silent. Stephanopoulos let the silence linger, a tactic he had perfected during his years of political interviews. That is absolutely false, Markle responded, her voice noticeably tighter. And honestly, I am surprised that a journalist of your caliber would ambush a guest with unverified allegations. These aren't unverified, Miss Markle. We have the receipts from the donors, copies of the thank you letters from your foundation, acknowledging the actual amounts, and then the public filings showing the inflated numbers. Would you care to explain the discrepancy? The production booth was in chaos. This was not the approved line of questioning. The segment producer frantically signaled to go to commercial, but Stephanopoulos simply ignored the cues. This interview was supposed to be about the foundation's work, not about baseless accusations, Markle countered, her composure beginning to fray. If there are any discrepancies, which I doubt very much, they would be simple accounting errors. Several journalists have reached out to your foundation over the past 3 weeks regarding these discrepancies. According to our sources, all of them received cease and desist letters from your legal team instead of explanations. Would you consider that an appropriate channel for addressing legitimate questions about a public charity? Markle's publicist moved forward, signaling that the interview needed to end, but Markle raised her hand slightly, stopping her. Your sources seem to have provided you with a very specific narrative, George, one that conveniently overlooks the tremendous good our foundation has accomplished. This feels less like journalism and more like an attempt at character assassination. I assure you, Miss Markle, my only interest is in the truth. And speaking of truth, there's also the matter of your foundation's claimed partnerships with several international organizations. We contacted all 5 of the organizations listed prominently on your website. 3 of them claimed they have no formal partnership with your foundation, and 2 stated they specifically asked not to be associated with your brand after initial discussions fell through. Can you address that? I find it interesting, George, that you've compiled what appears to be an extensive dossier of accusations without ever reaching out to us for comment before this interview. That doesn't strike me as ethical journalism. We did reach out, Miss Markle, multiple times over the past week. Your representatives told us all questions would be answered during this interview. In fact, I have the emails right here, Stephan replied, producing another document from his folder. Markle reached for her water glass, but her hand was visibly shaking. As she took a sip, she locked eyes with Stephanopoulos over the rim of the glass. You know, George, it seems you've prepared quite thoroughly for a completely different interview than the one my team and I were led to believe would take place today. I have to question the motivation behind this ambush. This isn't an ambush, Miss Markle. These are straightforward questions about public discrepancies in your foundation's records. As someone who has repeatedly spoken about the importance of truth and transparency, I would think you'd welcome the opportunity to clarify these issues for your supporters. What I welcome, George, is fair treatment, something that has been remarkably elusive in my experience with the media. If there are legitimate questions about our foundation's reporting, we will of course address them through the proper channels. but I won't participate in what appears to be a predetermined narrative designed to discredit work that is genuinely helping people. Now, regarding the community center in Detroit that your foundation claimed to have funded and opened last year, city officials say they have no record of such a facility. The address listed on your website is apparently a vacant lot. Can you explain that? The question hung in the air as Markle's expression hardened. I'm not going to dignify that with a response. Markle finally said, "It's clear to me that this interview was arranged under false pretenses. Actually, what's becoming increasingly clear are the discrepancies between your foundation's claims and reality. As journalists, our job is to seek the truth, especially when it involves public figures soliciting donations from hardworking Americans. You know what I find fascinating, George? The selective rigor of your journalistic standards. I wonder if you apply this same level of scrutiny to all your guests, or if there's something specific about me that warrants this treatment. Miss Markle, in my 30 years as a journalist, I've asked difficult questions of presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, and countless public figures. Your foundation has solicited millions in donations based on claims that now appear to be at best exaggerated and at worst fabricated. The public deserves answers, and they'll get them," Markle responded. "But not through this obvious hit piece, masquerading as an interview. Actually, Miss Markle, your team was provided with all of these documents yesterday. I have the delivery, confirmation, and an email from your chief of staff acknowledging receipt. Would you like me to show that as well?" The revelation landed like a bombshell. The momentary flicker in her expression suggested she hadn't been informed of this exchange. "I was not made aware of any such documents," she said carefully. "That's unfortunate," Stephanopoulos replied, his tone suggesting he didn't entirely believe her. "But now that we're here, would you care to address any of these specific discrepancies? Your supporters and donors deserve clarity, don't you think, George?" Markle said, her voice steadier now. "My foundation has helped thousands of people. If there are administrative discrepancies, which I'm not conceding there are, they would be clerical errors that could be easily addressed without this public spectacle." "Administrative discrepancies is certainly one way to characterize it," Stephanopoulos replied. "Your foundation claimed to have distributed over $2 million in grants last year. Our investigation found less than $800,000 actually reached these groups. That's a gap of more than $1.2 million. Would you classify that as a clerical error? Without seeing your alleged documentation, I cannot comment on specific numbers. Our foundation operates with complete financial transparency. Our annual reports are available online, and our books have been audited by a respected accounting firm." "Yes, Wellington and Associates," Stephanopoulos interjected. "They informed us they were only contracted to perform a limited review, not a full audit, as your foundation has repeatedly claimed. They specifically stated they did not verify the existence or amounts of the grants you claim to have distributed. Were you aware of that distinction?" Markle glanced briefly off camera before responding. "There's a fundamental misunderstanding here about the nature of our arrangement with Wellington and Associates. They perform the level of financial review that is standard for organizations of our size. I have their engagement letter right here," Stephanopoulos replied, tapping a document. "It explicitly states that their review does not constitute an audit and should not be characterized as such in any communications. Yet your foundation has used the word audit 27 times in public statements over the past year. I am not personally responsible for every piece of communication that goes out under the foundation's name," Markle said defensively. "We have a communications team that handles that messaging." "So, you're saying you weren't aware that your foundation was misrepresenting its financial oversight to donors and the public?" Stephanopoulos pressed. "I'm saying that if incorrect terminology was used, it was not intentional, unlike what seems to be happening here today." "And what exactly do you think is happening here today, Ms. Markle?" "A calculated attempt to undermine the credibility of my foundation and by extension me personally. The selective presentation of information, the ambush style of questioning. The pattern is quite clear, George. What's clear to me is that when presented with specific questions about your foundation's practices, you've chosen to question the motives behind those questions rather than addressing their substance. What's also clear, George, is that you've made up your mind about this story before I ever sat down in this chair. That's not journalism, that's agenda-driven theater. I came to this interview with questions, Ms. Markle, not conclusions. Questions based on documentation and statements from donors, partner organizations, and your own foundation's representatives. What I'd like to address is the troubling pattern of media outlets like yours focusing disproportionately on perceived flaws rather than the positive work being done. Do you know how many women have returned to the workforce through our program? Actually, that's an excellent question, Stephanopoulos replied. Your foundation has claimed that 5,000 women have successfully returned to the workforce through your Back to Work initiative. We contacted the Department of Labor and the workforce agencies you've claimed to partner with. None of them could verify those numbers. So, how did you arrive at that figure of 5,000 women? Those numbers are based on our internal tracking and follow-up surveys with program participants. Could we see that data? Stephanopoulos asked. That information contains sensitive personal details about the women in our program. We can't simply hand it over to a media outlet. I understand privacy concerns, but surely you could provide anonymized data. Markle's publicist moved into the frame, standing behind her chair. Markle, however, seemed determined to have the last word. George, I came here today in good faith to discuss the work of my foundation. Instead, you've turned this into an interrogation. I think we're done here. She began to remove her microphone. But Stephanopoulos continued. Before you go, Miss Markle, there's one more document I'd like to ask you about. We obtained an internal email from your foundation's CFO to your personal account. In it, he expresses serious concerns about what he calls unsustainable discrepancies in the foundation's financial reporting. The email indicates you personally instructed him to, quote, maintain the narrative regardless of the back-end realities. Would you care to explain what he meant by that? For several seconds, the studio was completely silent. Markle had frozen, her fingers still on the microphone clip, her eyes locked on Stephanopoulos. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Where did you get that? We protect our sources, Miss Markle. But the authenticity of the email has been verified by digital forensic experts. Would you like to address its contents? The publicist physically stepped between Markle and the camera. This interview is over. You are not authorized to ask these questions, and my client will not be responding further. Stephanopoulos remained composed, addressing his next words directly to the camera as Mark and her team began to exit. We invited Miss Markle's foundation to provide any documentation that would clarify or refute the discrepancies we've uncovered. That invitation remains open, and we will update our viewers with any response we receive. As the cameras continued to roll, capturing the unprecedented sight of a guest storming off the set of Good Morning America, viewers at home sat in shock at what they had just witnessed. Back in the studio, after Markle and her team had left, Stephan calmly shuffled his papers. Well, that was interesting. I think we should probably go to commercial now. After a brief commercial break, Stephanopoulos returned to the set alone. Looking directly into the camera, he addressed the viewers. For those just joining us, we've been speaking with Meghan Markle about her foundation. As you saw, Miss Markle and her team have left the studio. We stand by our reporting and the questions asked today. Robin Roberts joined Stephanopoulos at the desk. George, that was certainly unexpected, Robert said. Can you walk us through what just happened? Our team has been investigating inconsistencies in the financial reporting of Ms. Markle's foundation for several months, Stephanopoulos explained. The documents I referenced were all verified by multiple sources and provided to Ms. Markle's team well in advance of this interview. And their team acknowledged receiving those documents. Roberts asked, yes, we have confirmation they received everything yesterday afternoon. That's what makes her reaction today so surprising. As you can see, Stephanopoulos continued, gesturing to a graphic on screen. We reached out multiple times over the past 3 weeks. Each time, we were told all questions would be addressed during this interview. I'm being told that Ms. Markle's publicist is on the line and wishes to make a statement, Stephanopoulos announced. We're going to take that call now. The publicist's voice filled the studio. Good morning. I want to make it absolutely clear that my client was ambushed today with accusations that had not been properly vetted or presented to us in advance. The documents Mr. Stephanopoulos referenced were sent to a general email address less than 24 hours ago, with no indication of their importance. I have the email confirmation from your Chief of Staff, timestamped yesterday at 2:17 p.m., acknowledging receipt of those documents and confirming they would be reviewed before today's appearance. Would you like me to read that email on air? Stephan responded, after a pause. The publicist said, my client maintains that she personally was not made aware of these documents. There appears to have been a serious communication breakdown within our team. So, you're now confirming that your team did receive the documents. Stephanopoulos pressed. I'm saying there was clearly a miscommunication that resulted in Miss Markle being unprepared to address these specific allegations. We request the opportunity to review all materials properly and respond at an appropriate time. That opportunity remains open, Stephanopoulos replied. We welcome Miss Markle back at any time to address these questions with full preparation. We'll take that under advisement, the publicist said tersely before ending the call. What happens next in your investigation? Roberts asked. We continue to follow the facts. Our team has uncovered what appears to be a pattern of financial misrepresentation that raises serious questions about the operation of this foundation. The public deserves transparency, especially when charitable donations are involved. Ms. Markle is outside the building making a statement to other media outlets. Stephanopoulos announced, we're going to cut to that live. The broadcast switched to Marco outside the ABC studios. What happened inside that studio today was not journalism, she said firmly. It was a coordinated attack designed to undermine the important work of my foundation. Mr. Stephanopoulos had no interest in discussing the thousands of women we've helped. A reporter shouted, "Did your team receive the documents before the interview?" As ABC claims, there was clearly a breakdown in communication. Markle responded, "I personally was not briefed on any documents, which is why I was caught off guard by questions that seemed to come out of nowhere. Will you address the specific allegations about the financial discrepancies?" Another reporter called out, "My foundation operates with complete transparency. Any suggestion of financial impropriety is categorically false. We welcome proper scrutiny of our work through appropriate channels, not through ambush interviews designed for ratings." What about the internal email mentioned by Stephanopoulos, where you allegedly instructed your CFO to maintain the narrative regardless of back-end realities? A third reporter asked. "I will not dignify leaked communications that may have been taken out of context or altered. What I will say is that our foundation stands by its impact reporting and financial statements." Back in the studio, Stephanopoulos addressed viewers again. Ms. Markle is certainly entitled to her perspective on today's interview. However, I want to be absolutely clear about something. Every question I asked was based on documented evidence that had been verified by our investigative team. This was not about ratings or creating a spectacle. It was about accountability. The email mentioned during the interview seems particularly concerning, Roberts noted. Can you tell us more about that? The email in question was sent from the foundation's CFO to Ms. Markle approximately 3 months ago. In it, he expresses serious concerns about what he termed unsustainable discrepancies. In the foundation's reporting, the most troubling part was Ms. alleged instruction to maintain the narrative regardless of back-end realities, and your team verified the authenticity of this email. Roberts asked, "Yes, through multiple methods. The digital signature has been confirmed by forensic experts, and we have corroboration from 2 separate sources within the foundation who viewed the email chain. The broadcast cut back tomorrow outside. I have dedicated my life to service and helping others," she was saying. "My foundation represents that commitment in action. We will continue our important work despite these baseless attacks. Will you sue ABC News over today's interview?" a reporter shouted. "We are exploring all legal options at this time," her publicist responded. "That's all the questions we'll be taking. Is it true that 2 of your board members have resigned in the last hour?" another reporter called out. Markle stopped abruptly. Her publicist whispered something before addressing the reporters. "We have no comment on internal foundation matters at this time." Back in the studio, Stephanopoulos continued, "We've just received a statement from Wellington & Associates, the financial firm mentioned earlier. They confirmed that they were contracted only to perform a limited review of the foundation's finances, not a full audit, and that they explicitly informed the foundation that their work should not be characterized as an audit in any public communications. That seems to corroborate one of the key points from your questioning," Roberts observed. "Yes, it does," Stephanopoulos replied, "and it speaks to the larger issue here, which is the gap between what the foundation has claimed publicly and what can be verified independently." Stephanopoulos looked directly into the camera for his closing remarks. "Throughout my career, I believe that journalism serves an essential purpose in our society. We ask difficult questions not to create conflict, but to uncover truth. The questions I asked today weren't personal. They were about documented discrepancies that deserve explanation. We'll continue to follow this story and bring you updates as they develop," Roberts added. To our viewers, Stephanopoulos concluded, "We understand that stories like this can be uncomfortable to watch, but we believe you deserve nothing less than our most diligent effort to uncover the truth, especially when it involves public figures in charitable giving. We'll be right back after these messages," Roberts said as they prepared to go to commercial. "And now, I want to thank you all for watching this breakdown of one of the most explosive interviews in morning television history. If you found this analysis interesting, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into media's most shocking moments. What do you think about how George Stephanopoulos handled this interview? Was he too harsh? Or just doing his job? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next